Okay, I am going to call the meeting to order this evening at 7 p.m. Hello, everyone. I am Vice President Christensen. Welcome. Thank you for joining me. We'll start over here.
Hello, I am Member Westbrook. Thank you for coming out tonight.
Hi, Patrick Keogh. Thanks for joining us this evening.
Good evening, Anupam Chugsudu. Thanks for being here.
I'm Cheryl Picard, and welcome everybody.
Patty McQueen, thank you for coming out tonight.
Josh Patterson, Student Voice and Action Co-Chair and Plymouth Sophomore. Good to see you all tonight.
Sayu Pawar, Student Voice in Action Co-Chair and Junior at Canton High School.
Good evening and welcome. Superintendent Monica Merritt. I'd like to begin by introducing my assistant, Ms. Diane Robertson. We want to thank her for being here to capture our minutes every meeting, and the remaining members of the staff to introduce themselves to you.
Thank you, Dr. Merritt. Good evening, everyone. Nick Brandon, Executive Director of Communications and Marketing. Welcome.
Good evening, Kurt Tiskowitz, Assistant Superintendent for Student Services. Welcome.
Good evening, Jill Minnick, Chief Finance and Operations Officer. Good evening.
Good evening, Beth Rail, Chief Academic and Innovation Officer. Thanks for being here tonight.
Hi, I'm Debbie Piaz. I'm the soon-to-be retired Chief Finance and Operations Officer. Welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome, Liz Vartanian-Gibbs, Assistant Superintendent, Student and Family Engagement. Okay, let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And Josh, will you kick us off?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, on to adoption of agenda and approval of consent agenda. Can I have a motion, please?
Madam Vice President, I move that we adopt the agenda and approve the consent agenda. It's action item 24-12-33.
Second.
It was moved by Treasurer Kehoe and seconded by Secretary Sadoo. Dr. Merritt, can you take us through the agenda, please?
Thank you, Vice President Christensen. This evening, our consent agenda consists of human resources transactions. It's our last time together. We have a few champions for your consideration as new hires. We have resignations as well as the approval of minutes from two meetings. That's a regular meeting on November the 28th, 2023, and our special meeting on November the 29th, 2023.
Okay, I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Those opposed, please say no. Motion passes 6-0. Okay, since Ms. Langford isn't here, we have Dr. Vartanian-Gibbs, please take us through human resources.
Great. I am honored to introduce to you two new employees in our school district. First, Tamara Patterson. Stand up, Tamara. Tamara is going to be teaching 5th grade at Field Elementary School. We are so happy you are joining our school district and joining the team at Field. Welcome, Tamara. Next, I would like to introduce you to Julie Eichman. Julie, stand up. Julie is going to be the Elementary Student Success Specialist at Dotson Elementary School, and she's returning to the district. She was with us previously, and she's coming back to work at Dotson. Welcome, Julie. So Julie and Tamara, we have some special gifts for you. I'll just bring to you since there's just two of you, and we are so thankful you are here in Plymouth Canton Community Schools.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we're moving on to celebrating success with Member McCoyne.
This is one of the best parts of the meeting, especially when we have students to acknowledge. So this evening, the Board of Education will once again celebrate our school community with a STARS Award to our fantastic and generous 7th grade student at Discovery Middle School, Nolan Lake. As the old saying goes, true character is what you do when no one else is looking. However, the Discovery school staff members have taken note of the character of Nolan Lake, noticing he is always cleaning up around the outside of the building at Discovery. He truly takes pride in keeping the grounds looking great. He cleans up the bus loop after school and chooses to do this to keep his school community looking presentable for students and their families. His positive attitude and care is truly appreciated and admired. The protection and care that he has for a school setting to best serve his educators and fellow classmates makes us at the Plymouth Canton Community Schools proud and happy that we have students like Nolan. Would you like to come up, Nolan? And we also have some staff from Discovery that would like to say a few words. Alicia Peck, Bridget Wallman, and Mr. Alex Nurian, the vice principal, would also like to say a few words.
Good evening. My name is Alex Noroyan, and I'm the assistant principal at Discovery Middle School. It is my honor to speak about Nolan Lank, a remarkable student whose contributions to our school go far beyond the classroom. While many of us focus solely on academics or extracurricular activities, Nolan has taken it upon himself to make a profound impact in an often overlooked area, the cleanliness and tidiness of our school. He has exhibited an unparalleled commitment to ensuring that our learning environment is aesthetically pleasing for us all. His dedication to service embodies the spirit of volunteerism that we should all strive for. He has shown us that making a difference doesn't always require grand gestures. Sometimes it's the small, consistent acts of kindness and service that leave the biggest impact. Let us be inspired by his example and strive to contribute positively to our school and the world around us. Congratulations, Nolan, on this well-deserved recognition. Thank you for your invaluable service to our school, and go Eagles.
So the other teachers are coming up. All right. So on behalf of the, well, you know, it's hard to follow that. You really can't. On behalf of the Board of Education, I present Nolan Lank with the Student with Tenacity Achieving and Reaching Success, or STARS Award, for his efforts in keeping the environment, staff, and students safe at Plymouth Canton Community Schools. Thank you, Nolan. And would you like to say a few words?
No, I'm fine.
Okay. Mr. Brandon is going to want to get some pictures, also with your family. Yes. Oh.
Member McCoyne stated it. This is one of our favorite parts of all of board meetings, so congratulations to Nolan and to those at Discovery Middle School. So on to committee reports and, excuse me, I lost my place. And action, excuse me. So I am actually going to give the president's report this evening. President Wilson is traveling for work and unfortunately could not make it to this evening's meeting. But I do want to say a few things. So as this is our last meeting of the 2023 calendar year, I'd like to begin by inviting my fellow board members to each share a positive reflection about the year of 2023, or even a memory, just a fond memory that we have for this year. I'll start actually over to my right with Member Westra.
I always get to go first.
Oh,
So I thought a lot about this after we were told that we would be presenting this tonight. And I actually think that I have two. Number one is, you know, as a parent and becoming a school board member in the first year, as a parent, you always know that your school, your teachers, your administrators, you know, you have a small vision of what is P-CCS, and you know the good that P-CCS does with students and the passion that your teachers have. When you're a board member, it's kind of like pulling back the curtain and you see that it's not just your school, your teachers, your administrators, it's the entire district, the entire staff, you know, all the administration, all the families. And I think that's that's been humbling to me and good. And then second is the Starkweather graduation. I don't think that there is anything like it. And I hope that everybody in this room, everybody in the district, at some point has an opportunity to interact with Starkweather because it's an amazing place.
I would echo the comment on Starkweather, but I'm going to talk a little bit about a reminder this year that we've been doing a lot of things with the support of the community on the bond program, and that we neglected to inform the community on some of the projects and the works that we're doing. And we'll see those presentations again here this evening. There's been some fantastic updates and upgrades that we've done throughout our district, and those are all due into the support from the community and supporting the 2020 bond program in that process. And we've also seen the impact of those things on our students, how having separate spaces for dedicated lunch and cafeterias in the elementary schools has made it so we can better support our physical ed programs and better support our activities and programs with dedicated art and music spaces there as well. So it's really been really excellent in the work that we've done, and there's still a lot more coming as part of this process, but I'm reminded again that we need to do a better job communicating and talking about those programs and thanking the community for their support in that process.
Oh, go ahead. So there's a lot to be grateful for and to celebrate. I'll just do a couple. One, I just recall being at a concert, orchestra, choir concert, and I believe Miss Rail and Dr. Merritt were there. Phenomenal show put on by our kids, and I was in tears. I mean, it was just an emotional place. So much love and joy in our kids. And so those are just one of the things I hold on to and I cherish, that our kids have so much to give to us. On a personal note, my son is turning 18 tomorrow, and he started Plymouth Canton at the in first grade. He had a really tough, lot of challenges early on, and I'm grateful to the staff that embraced him in first grade and said, we will take care of your baby. And they've done that since day one. That doesn't mean he hasn't had hardships and challenges throughout, like any other kid. But I want to thank everyone that was part of his village. He is in a great place, and I'm just so grateful that he got to be here throughout the entire 12 grades, and he'll be graduating, and just so grateful to have that. And finally, I am grateful for all the successes that we've been hearing about this year, and I hope to continue serving and working collaboratively with the team to get better, because I know there's a lot of work that needs to be done to continue getting better. Member Picard?
Okay. I have two things that I just recently attended that I'd like to speak on, and one was the elementary Lego League competition that was hosted by the robotics group, and I just want to say that I was impressed by that, and just the way it was organized, and there was a couple parents that actually informed us about a lot of things. My husband also went, and just sharing everything, giving us a tour and the excitement that they had in just the whole program. And I also learned too that it wasn't just the technical engineering side of it, there was also the whole business side of it that I wasn't aware of, and just that there's a lot of opportunity for kids who are interested in that too. And the other thing that just recently, last week, I went to the Park Players performance of a 1940s radio Christmas carol, and they did a really good job on that. The singing was amazing, and they had some pretty intense harmonies there that was pretty, I mean, for them to accomplish that was really amazing. So I highly recommend, if you have time this weekend, they'll also be performing that on Friday and Saturday night, and so if you have a chance to go there, it's a good program. So just want to share that.
Thank you. Member McCoy?
Oh, we're sharing something?
Yes.
Okay.
You
I'm
were
sorry.
outside.
I was outside
some
taking
photos.
pictures. One of the things I really like is, for instance, tonight with the Celebrating Success, when we see what our students are actually doing, I'm always really impressed with our students. Member Sadhu and I had attended the MASB annual conference, and we were talking to someone about our committee structure, and they were very impressed that we have students who are willing to come to our board meetings and sit and participate, and that there are other students who are willing to be on our committees and participate in that. They were just very impressed that we have students who are involved and eager and engaged enough, and I think that that is a testament to the students, their families, and also the staff of the district. You see some of the staff over the years, and not too long ago we were giving an award, and there was one of my children's former teachers. She's been out of school for a while, and he still remembered her well enough to ask about her and ask something specific that she's doing today. And that says a lot about the staff that is in our buildings and working with our children. And so I think that's a real positive for the entire district.
Thank you all for sharing. I want to share a couple things as well. It seems like just yesterday we were kicking off the school year, and we were in the auditorium at Salem with Dr. Merritt and the team and all the staff kicking off the PD effort prior to the first day of school. And if we rewind back to that moment, this was the first in-person, I think, professional development that we've had since the pandemic. So there was a lot of excitement, a lot of energy in the air, and it was cool to witness in person and to be a part of that, and then to see that kind of carry through. Now we're in December. We're at the end of 2023. I can't, like, in a blink of an eye, we're here. Treasurer Kehoe, you kind of took my comment about the bond, but so I'll add to your comment too. So I'm very grateful for the bond work that continues to happen, and that the community supported in 2020. We're touching every single building in the district. So there have been improvements at the elementary schools and middle schools and high schools, and that work continues to be done. I really want to also thank our district administration and our partners with McCarthy Smith and TMP Architecture to really help us guide us in that vision and realize that vision, but also our students and our stakeholders for shaping these projects. So that's what I'm very grateful for this year. And I'm really looking forward to the work that we're going to do in 2024. In addition, adding to my report here, I want to share that we as a board, after our last meeting, had a special board meeting on Wednesday, November 29th, and it was a workshop around parliamentary procedures and Robert's rules as it pertains to running our board meetings and our committee meetings. And it was a lengthy, in-depth workshop, and I felt, and I know, speaking to my other board colleagues, that it was a very valuable workshop. We got a lot of information out of that. I think we all worked really well together. It also sparked some additional conversation around some future conversations that we can have, and continue to strengthen our team of 8. So that concludes my Vice President's report this evening, and I will kick it off to Finance and Operations with Ms. Minnick.
Thank you, Vice President
Oh,
Christensen.
So
I skipped.
we skipped all the other committee reports.
I skipped down to D. I'm so sorry. I got so excited to share a report that I messed up. Thank you for correcting. Okay, so we are on to Student Performance and Achievement Committee with Secretary Sadhu. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. I was unable to attend yesterday's meeting, so I'm going to pass it off to Trustee Westra.
Thank you very much. So we met last night in this room. The topics that we discussed were the health and reproductive health curriculum, which will be presented at this meeting in January, as well as a couple of name changes, 2 courses, and a new course for hip hop, the history of hip hop, which will also be presented in January. And then we reviewed the fall data review that will be presented tonight again. All of the conversations, all of the presentations and discussions were very good. We had a lengthy discussion about, I think, every topic last night, and I think it was a very good, positive meeting. Thank
When's
you.
the next meeting?
Oh, I'm sorry, and the next meeting is January 10th at 5 p.m. in this room.
Next, we have Policy Committee with Member McCoy.
So we actually met tonight. We generally meet after the second meeting, but when we have one meeting in a month, we meet now. So at this meeting, Mark Salzer and Andrew Steinman attended and talked about the student technology, acceptable use and safety, and staff technology. Pretty much the updates in those policies are around artificial intelligence and the use. And so we had discussed this previously. Board members had sent in some questions, and he has incorporated most of those into the draft policy he had. And then we had a few questions we needed to get from Neola, because as we learned, Neola, when they have a policy, they warrant their policy. And so we need to make sure any changes we are making don't void that warranty. So Ms. Langford is going to reach out to Neola about those changes, and then it will come back to the policy committee again, and send out the edits so far to the board to see if that answered the questions. And then we still have some policies we're waiting for our legal team to finish up with the edits, and we didn't get too much farther because we had a lengthy discussion, and we had several policies that teaching and learning are going to have to look at to see if those are still like the procedures that are being used, policies that haven't been updated for 20 some years. And so our next meeting is going to be January 23rd, 2024, 5:30. It is the collaboration space way down to the end of the hallway. Everyone is welcome.
Thank you. Okay, on to Finance and Operations Committee with Treasurer Kehoe.
Great. We met last Thursday here in this room, and we discussed a number of items that will be on the agenda this evening, including the East Middle School and West Middle School additions and renovations. We discussed the two-way radio purchases to update our bus process and unify some of our radio work, and a review of the band uniforms that are going to be replaced. We also reviewed the middle school furniture selections presentation for the renovations that we're doing at East and West, and the furniture that'd be part of that renovation. And we reviewed the conceptual plans for the Robotics and Innovation Hub that'll be going into the CTE wing at Canton as part of an upcoming bid award as part of that process. So the next meeting that we have, and we also reviewed our financial statements for the month of October. And an update on the Tanger property sale and that is pending as part of that obsolete property that we're selling. Our next meeting is hopefully the last committee meeting for the year. It's Thursday, December 21st. It's at 5 p.m. It is here in this room, and we welcome the community to join us.
Thank you. On to Student Voice and Action Committee with Josh and Saeed.
So we have not met since our last Student Voice and Action meeting, or since the last board meeting, and we will be accepting new SVA members, and they'll be invited to join us at our next meeting.
Our next Student Voice and Action Committee meeting will be December 18th at 6 p.m. and at the Canton High School. Hope to see you there.
Okay, thank you both. On to, here we go, sorry guys. On to administrative reports and recommendations. Dr. Merritt.
Thank you so much, Vice President Christensen. I have to say, as I sit here reflecting upon what I've just heard, my spirit is filled to just hear so many board members had the opportunity to visit programs and see our students and really amplify the wonderful talents and skills and gifts that our students bring to the table. Our kids love to see you there for their performances, and this is being holiday season. I want to invite continued participation from board members, our school community, to really just join us for our talented student performances that are going to take place. As you're hearing, 8 more school days in 2023, and they're going to be packed filled with students and celebrations. This evening, unfortunately, Discovery reminded me by being here, we have Discovery's winter concert. We're not able to be there. I think they have 120 6th grade students in their band, so I know they're over there having a great time, but we'll continue this concert lineup Tomorrow at PCEP, this will be Thursday the 14th at 7 p.m. at the Salem High School auditorium. Our PCEP bands take the stage for their winter concert. This concert will highlight the work of the band ensembles that are a part of the high school curriculum, as well as some of the extracurricular bands. The orchestra program will also present its holiday concert. That'll be Monday, December the 18th. This will be at 7 p.m. in the Logan Auditorium. And this concert will mark the first performance of the year for our middle school orchestra students. If you're aware, our middle school students travel for a 0 hour to the high school to participate in this program. This will also feature the beginning and advanced high school orchestras. And rounding out the concert lineup for the holiday season will be the PCEP Choir Program, which will present its annual Winter Song Concert. That will be on Tuesday, December the 19th at 7 p.m. in the Logan Auditorium. And we will see all PCEP's choirs perform holiday music along with other special selections. So again, tickets are available at the door. I invite the entire school community to come take a look at the renovated auditorium. We heard some accolades for our bond and the support of our community, but most importantly that it allows us to showcase the talents of our amazing young people. So that will be this week and next week. In between all of the concerts at the Logan Auditorium, we heard from Trustee Picard about PCEP's Park Players Theater Company. They are presenting their second show of the season this weekend. It's the A1940s Radio Christmas Carol. So I'm so glad to hear it was amazing. I am not shocked. We definitely want to encourage others to come out. The show again will run this Friday and Saturday at 7 p.m. and tickets are available at the door. And you can also buy tickets in advance at pcepparkplayers.com. Speaking of the season with student and family engagement, we continue to applaud the work of our department led by Dr. Vartanian and Gibbs. We really want to encourage our community to become involved in these sessions, these family sessions that are being offered through our Family and Student Engagement Office. There's a very special and important event being presented by our department on, which day is this? That's tomorrow. That's right, a lot going on in a short amount of time. This is called Keep Talking, They Are Listening. This is at 7 p.m. and this will take place at the Penn Theater. I do want to give a shout out to our partners at the Penn Theater because they have been so open to us and really when you think about Plymouth Canton Community Schools, it's really about the community and embracing opportunities to bring our community together. This free event here is designed to help educate our children and families about the extreme dangers involved with lethal drugs in today's world. This workshop will be presented by Judge Linda Davis. This is the Executive Director of Families Against Narcotics. In addition to her work assisting families dealing with substance abuse, she's also a mother of a child in a long-term recovery from addiction. So again, we just want to thank the department for their outstanding work in bringing these events together. I think we've got a picture of an event that took place last week. This was in partnership with the University of Michigan School of Music, Theater, and Dance, and they presented Painless, the opioid musical at the Penn Theater. And again, this show was an attempt to humanize the dangers and impact of opioid use, both for the users themselves and for their families and friends. So again, important resources, removing stigmas, and having an opportunity to provide some much needed support to many in our community. I want to round out my report this evening by giving a well-deserved congratulations to Madison Morrison, and I got a shout out this weekend from one of her champions that let me know that she hit the 1,000 point mark. She is the true example of a student first and an athlete. She is rocking and rolling in her classrooms in terms of her grades. And also, right now, she's a senior shooting guard on the Salem High School girls basketball team. Last week, she achieved the amazing accomplishment of scoring her 1,000th career point. She is one of the best players in the area, and she should be a Michigan Miss Basketball nominee at the conclusion of the 23-24 season this winter. Last month, she signed her letter of intent to enroll as a student athlete at Central Michigan University for next fall. So we want to congratulate Madison. We want to congratulate her coach. She's Coach Rod Wells, the entire Salem girls basketball program for their fantastic achievement. And again, just a huge shout out to Madison for her accomplishments in the classroom and on that court. She's rocking it and making us all proud. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Merritt. Now we're on to finance and operations with Ms. Minnick.
Thank you, Vice President Christensen. It's my pleasure to bring forward for the board's consideration this evening. We have bid pack number MS-2, East and West Middle School Addition and Renovations for first reading. Brian Guessman and Nick Tyndall are with us this evening from McCarthy and Smith to present this to the board this evening. Thank you.
Thanks for having us. We also have Derek Dinklew here with TMP Architecture. Again, thanks for having us. I'm Brian Guessman with McCarthy and Smith. The 2020 bond had been referenced a couple times this meeting, so this kind of feeds right into that. As a continuation of the 2020 bond program, this is our second bid package when it comes to the middle schools, which will be inclusive of East Middle School addition and renovation, as well as the West Middle School renovation. We'll go through a couple renderings that Derek will take us through, and then we'll go through the bid results as we receive them.
So at East Middle School, that gets a new main entrance, main office addition adjacent to the existing main entrance. If we could go to the next one. And that addition consists of the secure vestibule at the top there, coming into a welcome center with principal and assistant principal to the side. And then if needed, people can feed down into the building once they come through the secure vestibule. Also, conference room and a clinic in that area. And then you'll see down at the bottom, there's some existing. What was the old office gets renovated to social worker, student consultant. And then, the vocabulary of that addition fits into the STEM addition that was done in a previous bond and starts to unify the front of the building there. And like with all the secure entrances that we've been doing, signage and really getting that main entrance forward so that when people come up to when visitors come up, they know where to go into the building. And then west is all renovation, but again, to make a secure entrance into the building, the area near the media center there in the orange, that area gets totally renovated to bring the entrance or the welcome center forward. So the orientation has changed here. So there's the existing entrance to west already, and that's a secure vestibule, but you used to cross a corridor to get into the office. And so we've pushed that all up, created the welcome center there, also had the principal up towards the front, assistant principal more towards the corridor in the lower left there. Again, a clinic. And then again, this is renovated space, so just trying to create an open space as you walk in, so there's good visibility there, but also create an identity for the school. And that's the waiting area welcome center there. Also in both buildings is the typical renovations that we've been doing. I think the big thing at both schools is band and choir rooms getting new casework storage, instrument storage or music storage.
Thank you, Derek. And as he mentioned, this is kind of a continuation as part of the previous bond. We talked about building security. So there were a couple of buildings where those main offices were more centralized to the building that kind of caused students or parents that were to drop off had to kind of walk into the building to find the office. So this is kind of starting to round out the remainder of those projects, bringing that true secure vestibule forward to create that safe space. This is always one of the finer print slides, so we've segmented it in a couple to try and blow it up as big as we can. But this is our bid summary. So we've collected bids in mid-November. In totality, we received upwards of 114 bids, which across all of those bid divisions, we had pretty much excellent coverage. Upwards of 4, 6, 8 bids were received per bid category. I would highlight only one that we identified only having one bidder that submitted, and that was part of the athletic equipment category. That is often one that it's limited bids in the first place. There's limited contractors that work within that realm. Again, for the athletic equipment, it does fall in line with the budget as well as the proposals we've received to date. And we've also highlighted and categorized the women-owned businesses. It looks like I'm missing my summary on this page, so we'll have to update that. But we've identified all the women-owned companies, the minority-owned companies, 7 of which were women-owned, 4 of which were minority-owned, and then upwards of 54 and 53 union and non-union individual companies, as well as some other affiliations as regards to veteran-owned businesses. One thing that we did talk in at F&O that we will be circling the wagons with as far as creating a summary of some of those bids that we received over the course of time as we've been tracking this information. One bit of information or something that's been highlighted is identifying who those bids are being received from and trying to get a vast majority of different types of bids. So that's something that we're continuing to track, monitor, and do whatever we can to try and improve some of those bid results. This next slide is the alternates. So oftentimes, whether it be from a budget perspective or pricing exercise, we identify different alternates that we bring to the table for discussion. So we have 8 to bring to you today. One of which we are not recommending, which would be in correlation with some of the other strategies that we've taken forward thus far with some of the other bid packages, and that's alternate number 1, which is LED lighting replacement. That occurs both at east and west. This is mainly the corridors. As part of the base bid, there's a significant amount of classrooms, existing classrooms, that are still scheduled to receive LED lighting, and that's to the tune of just over $1 million. What we've done in the past, historically, based on the price that's been received, seems to be a little bit higher than we would anticipate. And so we've deferred some of those costs in some of those previous bid packages that you've seen. Certainly not taking it off the table, but based on the return on investment that we're seeing thus far, are not necessarily advising that we accept that today, which is why it's highlighted in red. Alternate 2 is the East Middle School gym divider. We're recommending that for acceptance today. Alternate number 3 is the life management casework replacement that we would recommend for acceptance today. Alternate 4, which is at East and West, to provide portable stair and riser systems for the music and arts program. We would recommend approval for that. Alternate number 5, food service equipment. Accepting that alternate would kind of bring it based on what we've got at Pioneer to basically an equilateral food service equipment across the board. Alternate number 6 is East and West, and alternate number 7 is very similar. So without getting into all the details, there's a full depth replacement of asphalt. That's what we're talking about, parking lot replacement, which is part of both East and West base bid. In some sections, we're only recommending to what's called crack seal and seal coat, which is somewhat of a minimum for pavement in decent condition. We solicited quotations to, instead of crack seal and seal coat, but to mill and cap that area, which was a little bit more robust of a fix for that area that provides a little bit more longevity for the parking lot as a whole. We are recommending acceptance of both of those alternates 6 and 7 today. And then finally, alternate number 8, which is to the tune of about $113,000. This is as it relates to the East Middle School addition and where the primary power comes into the building. Based on all the surveying, it seems like that primary power is awfully close to the addition. So this is more of a, in case we need it, type of alternate. So if we don't need to use it, it will be credited back. But this is a mechanism for us to competitively price out the potential need to relocate that primary. So it's a significant chance that will need to take place, but we're able to facilitate a competitive number as opposed to having to have a selective bidder give us that price at a later date. So that is, again, something that is being included as part of this recommendation, but it will only take effect if that work indeed needs to be done. Unfortunately, sometimes with the surveying, you can only get within a margin, so to speak, and so until you start digging foundations and identifying some of those utilities, it becomes difficult to do. So we're recommending that we accept that today. So that brings us to a total budget summary. So we have a construction budget of $10,230,822, with the base bid total of $7,619,282. We include all of the accepted alternates, which gives us a total of $8,099,432, with a positive variance of $2,131,390, which is to the positive about 20%. We mentioned an F&O, and it's, I think, worthwhile to mention at the board today, the one thing that is in that budget that we are not accepting is that $1 million. So when we look at, boy, that is great news. $2 million looks great on the screen. There is $1 million of that we're basically deferring. We want to look for a better opportunity, potentially combine that at a later date with a future LED lighting package that could be better suited for the district from a time and money standpoint. With that, we move on to schedule and when this work, if approved, would proceed. Starting with East Middle School, which includes the addition, we would potentially plan to break ground this summer of 2024. The renovations themselves would take place and be completed this fall while school is out of session, or this summer in anticipation for school to return back in the fall. The addition for East Middle School would continue on through the course of the school year. So very similar to how we approached Pioneer. It is certainly an impact to students and staff as they approach the building, but unfortunately when you build on to the front of the main office, there are some logistical challenges that we have to overcome, but that work would continue on to the 2025, year 2025 in February. And then West Middle School, we would plan on starting this summer and finishing this summer in anticipation for students to return in fall, this upcoming fall. With that, again, thanks everybody for the opportunity and the voters supporting the 2020 bond, and offer up any questions that you might have.
Great, thank you. Let's start with.
Lauren, I just had a couple things I wanted
Sure.
to clarify before the questions go around.
Sure.
So on the West Middle School process, we're also redoing the locker rooms and the kitchen service area as well, correct?
Correct.
So those weren't really highlighted here, but I wanted to call that out. It was also $1.2 million that was deferred in the overall bid package, not just $1 million. So that is part of that thing. And also there was some great work that was done with our stakeholders to review the projects and the work that needed to happen. So some of the things as part of the bond process, they identified maybe boilers might have needed to be replaced or roofs needed to be done, and they identified that some of those things didn't need to be done to that same level. So they may come up at a later bond portion of this bond or in subsequent bonds, but we're not purchasing things that we don't need to right now. And that helps to offset some of the cost increases that we've seen in other periods. So some of this cost savings was against budget was a function of de-scope. So we reduced the scope on those things for maintenance items and replacements that didn't need to be done at that time.
Thank you for that additional context. Member McCoy, do you have any questions?
I really don't. Thank you for this presentation. I like the way that the buildings are being kind of upgraded so that it's really obvious where you go in. That's really helpful for the community when they show up at a school to know where to go in.
And I have no questions, thank you.
Thank you for the clarification, Treasurer Kehoe. Just a quick question in terms of the committee meeting. What was the discussion like with regard to not doing the LED lighting right now and putting it off for, and what do you anticipate the time frame to be, if at all? Would you come back to it?
So it comes up every single annual, spoiler alert, it probably will continue to come up in every single, because it is, as part of EL1, which is the first bid package we've done, that was kind of right on the heels of COVID, and we've not only saw some issues with supply chain, but the longevity and some of the issues we saw with it did not seem appetizing to continue to recycle those issues that we've been noticing. So we keep close contact with a lot of the distributors and lighting manufacturers and installers to try and get to a point where it makes sense. So we kind of look at that as individual projects. We look at it from a budget perspective, but also long term, does it make more sense to kind of condense and combine some of that into its own bid package that becomes a little bit more tolerable? Because what we don't want to do is put ourselves in a position where now all the old lights are gone, we can't get all the new lights. It becomes a lot of work for somebody to do over the course of a summer, which then goes into a kind of a labor perspective. So we take a lot of variables in there. We haven't determined a final date, but we certainly, about every F&O meeting it does come up and we discuss it.
Yeah, so it's really about the price is substantially higher than we than what we would expect to see for this. And so therefore, with also some of the technology and longevity issues, we've been seeing more warranties on some of those things, which means you incur higher labor costs to replace that. Now, the warranty covers the devices, but then we're incurring the labor costs to do that. So we're waiting to see if some of the technology matures and the prices come down from some of the supply chain constraints. And then we also have the opportunity to open this up as a wider bid across the whole district for those buildings that we haven't upgraded.
That
So,
makes sense.
Lots of, you'll continue to see this as we see this
Good.
changing, but
But it's still on the radar.
We've got a pin in it.
Right.
We've got a
Certainly
pin
still
in
on
it,
the
and
radar.
We're continuing to definitely look at these.
And I think it's important to note, although we say the LED upgrade isn't included, if there's areas of significant improvement, such as there's some ceilings that are being replaced at East Middle School, we're not taking out old lights and putting up old lights. So if it's a significant scope of upgrade, LED lights are going back in those spaces. Certainly when we talk about the addition, those are all getting LED lights. It's more of a global, every corridor, every restroom. That's really that alternate that we've broken it out to try and price out and see what makes sense.
Great, that clarification helps. No other questions? I do appreciate the pictures that you've shared, and that looks beautiful. Can't wait to visit it.
Thank the community for their support for these bond programs and all the hard work that goes into this. This, as with all the bond programs, have stakeholders that are included from teachers, students, families, our maintenance teams. Everybody is participating in design sessions, and there's lots of reviews of these things before it finally comes forward to the board where we vote on this. So there's lots of opportunities to get that feedback and ask questions. You're just seeing the final result of that process. So again, thanks everybody for their work in getting us to here.
Member Westra?
I think Member Kehoe answered my question, but is the athletic equipment for the locker rooms?
The athletic equipment is, we've got in the, I believe it's specific to East, it's basketball backstops and backboards.
Okay.
Yeah, so
And the gym divider.
at East, that's what it is, but West is getting new locker rooms, correct?
Correct, but the athletic equipment, that is a totally separate bid division. If
Okay.
that makes sense.
Okay. Thank you. No more questions, but good work. Thank you for the presentation.
Saeed?
I have no questions, but thank you for your easy to follow presentation.
And my question has been answered, so thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you. Next this evening, we have for your consideration the bid awards for marching band uniforms for first reading this evening. And for that, I'll hand it over to Beth Rail.
Thanks. So tonight for your consideration, as Ms. Minnick said, just want to talk to you about the purchase of new band uniforms. It's been many years since we've had new band uniforms. As well, although they've been well maintained, it is time for replacement of our uniforms. So we requested bids for the purchase of 155 uniforms for performers and 3 uniforms for drum majors. Our goal is a uniform that can showcase each PSEP high school individually and then one combined unified look. So I'm going to use some terminology and come to some common understanding of a couple of these terms. So the 4 interchangeable uniform kits would include performance shirts, first I'll do the main uniform, which is a jacket, bibbers, which bibbers are like the pants. So in my head, I think about them as like snow pants, right? So they're a long snow pant, and then a shako. So if Mr. Brandon, if you want to roll up to the picture, the shako is the large hat that is worn with the uniforms. So if you see it, the shako is up here. These are a couple of artist renderings of what our uniforms could potentially look like, but they would actually be designed by our staff and students once the bid award would happen. So the 4 interchangeable uniform kits, which you'll see over here, include performance shirts, drop sashes, gauntlet, which are the gloves, shako wraps, so it makes the color different on the hat, and then the plumes, which would represent the different high school colors, and then one unified look that can be done across PSEP. Uniforms would be inventoried and housed at Plymouth High School. Total cost, there was one bidder who actually submitted an RFP. It is our current uniform provider. We've used them for over 25 years. And the total recommended cost is $183,280. Open it up to any questions you might have.
Start with Member McCoyne.
So I'm not sure what year they started with those uniforms, but I know that those gray ones were worn in 2004. So that is that's at least 20 seasons of marching band. So I don't believe they were new that year. But, so, they've had plenty of wear. They take very good care. They have a whole program of people who take care of the uniforms.
Yep, I have no questions. I got a full explanation at the F&O meeting, so thank you.
Member City. I think Trustee McQueen partially answered my question. What's the life expectancy of these once you buy them?
So they have at least a 10-year warranty on them.
Okay.
And then also, as Member McCoyne discussed, they are very well maintained and well cared for by our staff. The bid also includes cases for the hats as well as garment bags. So we actually leave them on site and stuff. So they're very well taken care of. So, you know, at a minimum of 10 years, but hopefully longer. But of course, we want to continue to improve our programming.
And just to follow up, in terms of cleaning or maintaining, is there a budget to support the ongoing upkeep of these? What, Ms. McQueen?
So they have washer parents, and each washer parent is assigned a certain group of kids, and they collect those uniforms after each performance, and they take them home, and they and then they bring them back, and then there's a group of people who also make sure they fit well and do any, extraneous. Loretta Chastain was a washer parent when her son was in it. So, no,
it's an in-house job.
It's because it's very specific instructions to keep them, the material, the way it's supposed to be.
All right, thank you.
So at F&O, we discussed this extensively. So FJM, Fred J. Miller is the company that we're getting these things from, and they actually pioneered the washable band uniform. So these are machine washable band uniforms as part of the process instead of having to be dry cleaned. If I believe as part of the packet here, these have a lifetime warranty on them, and that we heard from one of the citizens that attended the F&O meeting that his wife was one of the people that did alterations and repairs on these, and she said we're probably about 3 years past the time that we should have been buying new uniforms. They've been able to keep these things in good shape, but it is definitely time to do this. And while this is an expensive cost, there's a large number of interchangeable pieces to support different schools, different events, different processes as part of this. So it's not just like a coat. It's, the shako and the plume and the hat box and everything else that goes with all these things. And that also we are purchasing additional uniforms because the lead time on these uniforms is about 6 months. So even when you have to buy additional ones as part of that, there is a fairly long lead time. But each of those uniforms are tailored or adjusted to support the students that are part of that particular year. So we'll have extras in the event that there is a insurge of new students or if there's ones that don't fit. So we've got a lot of flexibility with this uniforms and the processes that we're doing.
When will we be able to get the new uniforms?
210-day lead time.
Sorry?
210-day lead time.
So not before band season next year.
Yeah, it's sometime in the fall next year, depending on when because our team will sit, if this is approved, with the Fred J. Miller folks and design the uniform, and then from that point on is the lead time. So.
Okay, so possibly by
Yes,
band
next school
season
year,
next
as soon
year.
as possible within the next school year.
Okay.
Over to Saeed.
I have no questions, thank you.
I have just one question. So would students be involved, and you might have mentioned this, in the design and like looking at the design of the uniform?
Yeah, they'd work with our band directors to do that. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we're on to action item number 24-12-34. Consider approval of a resolution for a transportation two-way radio purchase. This is a first and final reading.
Ms. Vice President, I move that we consider approval of a resolution for transportation two-way radio purchase, first and final reading, action item 24-12-34.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it was moved by Treasurer Kehoe and seconded by Secretary Sadoo. Want to give us some context here?
So the reason we're bringing it forward as a first and final, I'll let Ms. Minnick, Ms. Minnick provide the details. The reason we're bringing it forward is just timing on the purchase of these things to try to get them in before the next school year as part of this process.
Okay.
Thank you. Beginning in 2021, Plymouth Canton Community Schools began replacing the outdated two-way radios across the district. At the building level, many of the units were outdated and running on an analog platform. So phase 1 was to replace all of the building radios. Phase 2 was to replace the repeater system that is housed at PSEP. Now in phase 3, we are requesting approval to replace the analog transportation communication system with a digital system that is compatible with current upgraded building communication systems. In 2021, Bearcom was the vendor who was awarded the contract for the phase 1 purchase. In 2022, for phase 2, we asked that the Board of Education waive the formal bidding process and purchase the equipment from Bearcom in order to have continuity in our district systems. So once again, we are asking the board to waive the formal bidding process and to complete phase 3 by purchasing the needed equipment from Bearcom once again. District staff have been meeting with Bearcom and Motorola representatives to secure pricing lower than consortium pricing offered nationwide. So with that, the combined price of the radios, equipment, installation, programming, and labor is $258,773, and the cost of the AvTech dispatch console is $300,200 for a grand total amount not to exceed $558,973. And this cost will be paid with State of Michigan 2023-2024 31AA grant funds. This item was discussed at the Finance and Operations Committee meeting as shared already, held on November 9th and also December 7th. Thank you.
Okay, let's open it up to discussion. Do you have any further things to share, Treasurer Kehoe?
Just some context for people that might be useful. The AvTech dispatch console is not just for the bus radios. It's instead a console that allows us to unify the communications across the whole district and all of our new digital radios. And the intention here is actually to purchase 2 AvTech consoles. We may be able to not need the second one, or we may deploy the second one in our backup security facility. So that decision is still to be considered as part of this process, but we're getting the authorization to do both. As I mentioned, from a timing perspective, we're bringing this forward as first and final because of the lead time to purchase these radios, and that with the holiday coming up, that would potentially put us in risk of not having them done before the start of next school year in that process. And then lastly, I want to commend the work with our finance and operations team and our security team in doing additional negotiations. From the time that this originally came forward until this bid, we've lowered the price by more than $15,000, while also trying to identify if there were other vendors that could compete against this, could compete in this, and these prices were substantially lower than anything we could get. So even though it was the lowest price that we could get before, they all got another $15,000 off, approximately $15,000.
Thank you. We'll start over with Member McCoy.
You answered my question, so thank you.
And I have no more questions, thanks.
Yeah, no additional questions.
Just can you remind me what 31AA is? Is that the safety and security funds? Okay.
Actually, for the 23-24 year, it's student mental health and security. It was combined in this fiscal year for 23-24.
Okay, thank you.
I have no questions, thank you.
I also have no questions, thank you.
All right. Thank you for that. All right, I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Those opposed, say no. Motion passes 6-0. Okay. On to action item 24-12-35. Consider approval of a resolution for bid pack number HS-4, P-CCS-1, Canton High School Edition, renovation and new stadium. This is a final reading. Can I have a motion, please?
Ms. Vice President, I move that we consider approval of resolution for bid package HS4 PSEP1, Canton High School Edition, renovation and new stadium. This is action item 24-12-35, and this is our final reading.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it was moved by Treasurer Kehoe and seconded by Member McCoyne. We discussed this at our last meeting. Do we have any other follow-up dialogue, discussion, or questions? No? Okay, I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor, please say yes.
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 Those opposed, say no. Motion passes 6-0. Okay, on to teaching and learning with Ms. Rail.
Good evening. I'm here tonight with several members of Teaching and Learning, but primarily our Jonathan Flukes, who is our Director of Data Assessment, Research, and Evaluation. And we're going to talk to you about our fall data review. So as we look at tonight's presentation, I also want to take us back a little bit in time and do a reminder that as we continue this work, we're continuing this critical work around helping support our students around their unfinished learning that happened during the pandemic. So you're going to see, as you see the data, you'll see some breaks in assessment because of the fact that we were not in school for part of the time that our young people have been in their elementary years specifically and throughout the rest of their years. So a little bit of purpose for tonight, and we're going to provide an update on the progress towards our goals and strategic objectives in our dynamic plan. Share an overview of the data this fall. And again, fall data gives us benchmarks and the foundational look at where we look to progress throughout this year as well. You'll see some things and some activities at the end, the connection between our data and our multi-tiered systems of support. So we'll talk about some of the specific strategies and personnel that we've layered on to do this work. And many of those started last year, continue this year, and at the end of this year, we'll bring back data again to share what our progress is on those pieces of implementation. And we need to reconfirm the mode of instruction for 23-24. To continue to receive our federal funds, we need to do this every 6 months. So I'm just reminding the board and our community that we do this reconfirmation at that time. Anchoring us in our dynamic plan goals, we're really focusing on all of them, but primarily strategic goal A, which is increasing our achievement for all students and closing achievement gaps. And then also looking at our multi-tiered systems of supports. When we look at our teaching and learning objectives, these specific ones are the ones we're focusing on tonight. And again, reconfirming our mode of instruction. We are providing in-person instruction for all early childhood through post-secondary programs. And we have a P-CCS virtual academy option for our students in grades 3 through 12. Logic model, why do we do this work? It's really about looking at the big picture at a district-wide view of this work. How are our students recovering from the pandemic? How are we progressing towards closing those achievement gaps and eradicating them? And how are our students in aggregate doing? As we look at our resources, we're really looking at our NWA benchmark assessments, reports from MyStar around attendance, behavior, different metrics that help support students' achievement in classrooms. The more students are in school, the more likely they are to achieve through academic progress. Student Panorama, Student Success Platform. We're going to hear just briefly about that tonight because in January we're going to do a more in-depth dive into the student responses around the Panorama Student Success Platform as well as the staff. And then again, our outputs are our data, our reporting, our activities are our review of data, and then our goals are to ensure that all students are proficient in achieving their growth. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Jonathan Flukes, and he's going to walk us through the data, and then I'm going to come back at the end, kind of talk about a few things we're doing, many of which are continuation, but a few new things we're layering on to continue to additionally support growth in these areas, and then we'll take questions from the group.
Is this the PDF version or is this the Google Slides version? Because I don't look like there's I had some cool animations, so I like unraveled each slide. So I don't know if that's gonna happen this one. So this slide kind of sets the stage for like what I'll be talking about for the next 10 or 15 minutes or so, and kind of set everyone's expectations in terms of like what we can expect to really make sense of these data points. And so really we're looking at very large grain size data for the next few minutes when we talk about demographics and attendance, behavior, and then student achievement. And these really give us a chance to illuminate patterns we might see either over time or across grade levels, and they can kind of point us in general directions. They don't tell us the exact answer of what to do next. So what we do is we use our other data systems. We use Panorama, we use MyStar, we use DNA to dig in and then look at those patterns we might see and then kind of take actions where we see appropriate. So that's kind of like where we're going to be going for the next 10 minutes. And we'll start with demographics. Shoot, I wish I had those animations. So this is kind of the general makeup of our districts currently based on fall data. So this gives us a sense for the students that make up our community and attend our schools, and kind of give a sense for what we see here. And there really wasn't much change when we compare these percentages compared to the previous couple years, especially last year. So this really has remained unchanged in terms of race and ethnicity breakdowns. The additional student groups we also traditionally look at are students who are economically disadvantaged, students with an IEP, as well as the multilingual learners. So these are the proportions currently based on, these are unofficial counts, but these are pretty close to what we have currently in the district. One thing I want to say about our economically disadvantaged proportion, that is down slightly from last year. It was at 23% last year, but I verified with our nutrition services, and we have had fewer families apply for supplemental nutrition. So this might not actually represent the status of our economic needs in the district. That 20%, it might actually be higher just because families aren't applying for supplemental nutrition because of the statewide access to the free lunch and breakfast program. And students with an IEP and as well as multilingual learners, those have remained pretty stable compared to last year. Before we get to that, okay, so in those animations, what we know is that a missed school day is a lost opportunity for student learning. A missed school day is a lost opportunity for student learning. So luckily we have some positive trends with our students attending school compared to what they were before the pandemic. We're trending back up toward those pre-pandemic levels, and not only are we seeing it across the entire district, but also each of the individual student groups that we just looked at in the previous slide. So you can kind of see here the last several years of the average daily attendance rate for each of those groups, and you kind of see that positive trend we're seeing across each group for the most part.
He's loading the presentation for you.
All right, thank you. Look at that, see, it works. There's our all students group, just to highlight that. Behavior also, we know that suspension has negative impacts on student outcomes. So we have seen a decrease in students who have been suspended. When we look at some of the pre-pandemic levels, we had that increase. We also know that we had some additional behavioral challenges after students returned from the pandemic, and we're seeing kind of those suspensions come back down towards what they were before the pandemic as you look at the 18-19 fall data. So this is just looking at fall data over the last several years, not looking across the entire year, just September through December, what did it look like each year, so we can kind of have an apples to apples comparison to see kind of what that looked like. So some positive trends there. Now let's kind of switch to academic achievement data. So we'll take a few minutes now to kind of set the stage for what we'll be talking about in terms of academics. One of the things that, do we have this one here? It's not advancing. Oh, there it is. I think we're missing some slides in the previous one. We've made some updates. I don't know if we have the most recent one up there. Let's see. We'll just go with that then. Is it correct in the board packet?
Yeah. First one, rather. But it didn't have the animation.
Maybe we switch back to the board packet version. And
Let's do the
give
board
up-
packet version then, if it,
Sorry.
since the animations aren't, won't impact it too much, since it's really the content that's the important thing. The animation is just the icing on top. All right, so look at that. Okay, this is what I was to now step into academics and achievement. So I want to kind of walk from like a national perspective and then kind of go to the state level and then kind of our local level. So just from a national perspective, we kind of saw in 21-22 kind of a lot of places, and especially within P-CCS, we kind of saw a rebound from students coming back from the pandemic. And what we saw recently with the new research study is that from a national perspective, that rebound has kind of stalled a bit. So that return to what we were hoping to be, students' progress from before the pandemic kind of slowed down a bit. And so and the national perspective is seeing that we're still seeing some of those gaps, and we're kind of here to highlight some, additional months that really we build up to in order to bring students back to what that was before the pandemic. And unfortunately, we're still seeing a lot of achievement gaps from a national perspective as well, especially for marginalized students. Still remain kind of furthest from recovery. So that's kind of like the global perspective, kind of set the stage and build a context for what we'll talk about with what we see here in the district. So for the state assessment, I think it's important to kind of ground us in terms of why these things exist, the state assessment. So this kind of highlights some paraphrased language from a lot of the state and MDE documents that talk about why these assessments exist. And so the top one there, state and federal laws kind of require those things in order for us to receive certain kinds of funding from the state and federal government. But importantly, it helps us measure, at least so for assessments are more of estimates of what students know. So these aren't perfect, exact identification of what exactly a student knows, but these are our best guess based on the test creators on what students know. But the state assessments are designed to identify students in relation to how much they know about the state content standards for that grade level at that time of the year. And then it's incumbent upon the state and districts to then share that information with all the stakeholders, teachers, families, the community, etc., how schools, districts are performing and students. And then in terms of accountability purposes, the state uses those to then identify and target support to buildings that really need that support because of evidence they're seeing from how they're performing on state assessments and in other areas. As well as they use that to identify areas for success for some districts as well. So that's kind of like what we talk about when we talk about state assessment. And one common misconception that I hear from families when we go back to that second statement there, because a student isn't proficient doesn't mean they're failing. It just means that they might not be meeting the content standards at that point in time on that test day that year. It doesn't mean that they're failing. And in terms of the ELA assessment, I also hear a lot of times, illiteracy or students can't read based on a not proficient score. This is an English language arts assessment, and so a student who's not proficient just might be not quite there yet in that grade level. So these are one test in time, and they can't tell us everything, but they do give us some indication for how students are performing on the content standards for the grade level. So the metric we look at typically for state assessments are percent of students who have met the proficient or advanced category. So percent met is what we traditionally refer to those as. And so this is the guide that the state has for all about the state assessments, what grade levels, and a lot of details about each individual assessment. And that's available in the documentation here. And we won't go through all of those things here. One thing to note, though, is that we can sometimes see slight variations in the percent proficient over time, but they might not have any real practical change because of just how cut scores are developed. And so there are some districts and some researchers that estimate about a 3% margin of error sometimes on percent proficiency. So there might be slight fluctuations, but they might not be any real actual change. So those are some things just to keep in mind as you look at percent proficient, because it's a really high level view look at how students are performing. So here's some of the highlights from the most recent state assessments, which occurred last spring. And if we look at comparisons from last year, in terms of elementary grade performance, we see a lot of stability over time. We saw some slight decrease in some of the grade levels, but we saw progress in several areas, including ELA and math in grades 6 and 8. We saw progress in science in grades 8 and 11, And in grades 5, 8, and 11, we saw some progress in social studies. And then ELA in grades 8 and 11 remained pretty stable when looking at last year's performance compared to this year's performance. So those kind of the big ideas or the key findings from last year to this year. I should say from two years ago to last year. And so this is kind of what that looks like. There's a lot of data in one place, but it highlights kind of some of those changes over time. It highlights some relative comparison to the state and to the county. And it also gives us that percent proficient across time. So it kind of gives us a lot of information that we can look at in one spot. So if you look at, this is just the MSTEP and PSAT data together. So that's kind of our core assessment system, ELA, math, science, and social studies. And we're looking at all students in the district. And in the blue there is what we have, the Plymouth Canton percent proficiency. And then those muted colors there represent Wayne Risa and statewide. So you can kind of see where we stack up in terms of comparing us to the county and the state. You'll note that there's that kind of that, as Beth mentioned, we have missing data. So we did not have a state assessment in that 1920 school year, and even in the 2021 school year, statewide, only about 70% of eligible students took the assessment because it was made optional for students who were getting their education in a remote setting. So even our 2021 data is a little bit suspect in some cases, so we can't take a lot of information from that because it was not a representative sample of students in our district or even in the state across the board. The next slide, we see that we've separated, we have the same information but now for students who are economically disadvantaged. So again, same information, same comparison time frame, same comparison groups. Now we're looking at students who are economically disadvantaged and the percent proficient. And the next slide has students who have an individual educational program and that trend over time. And these are students who are multilingual learners. Same data points, trends over time. So now let's switch to, we saw kind of a national perspective, we saw some of our state level data. Now let's talk a little bit more of our local data, at least some of our benchmark data. So talk about our purpose with NWA. So we have lots of purposes that we kind of use our NWA map data for. So here's kind of a list. I won't read through each one of these, but you can see we use the information we gather from these map assessments to inform some of these things that we do here in the district. And they range from informing kind of individual student progress, program improvements. It's used as part of some of our teacher evaluation systems, as well as helping identify students for different services and programs. But it's not the only thing we use. It's one piece of additional set of information we use to help support educators and students and families in the district. So it gives us additional information, does not give us everything, but gives us some additional information so we can kind of support students in different ways. And the metrics we use, so NWA is different than the state assessments. We don't have a proficiency score. They don't have a set goal. Here's where a third grader should be at the end of the year. The things we look at when we look at NWA, when we look at that global level, that high level satellite level view, are really comparing us to a national norm, a national data set. And so the things we're looking at are percentile ranks, our achievement data, which compares us to the average percentile rank in the nation, as well as when we look at growth, we look at the percent of our students who are meeting kind of projected growth based on a national data set. So this kind of gives us a sense for what we're looking at for these two different metrics when we look at our NWA map data. So some of the key findings to highlight before we look at some of the visuals. You'll see when we look at our achievement data that all of our grade levels performed well above the national norm in both reading and mathematics. So we continue to be a very high-performing district. When we look at our percentile ranks, it's extremely high when we compare us to other districts that are in the national data set. We're also seeing some pretty positive growth movement across many grade levels and in in the 2 content areas that we assess. So most of the grade levels that we assess, we met or exceeded kind of the expectation that NW has based on their national norm set. And I'll point out some of those things when we get to the visuals. But you see reading in many grade levels and in math in most grade levels, we're seeing some of that positive growth across the board. So here's an example of that achievement data. This is each grade level is at the top, and then the content areas are in blue for reading and green for math, and that orange line represents that national benchmark, that national average from the data. So you can see that we're well above that national average in all of our grade levels in terms of that average test percentile. And then if you can see in those parentheses, it has kind of the numbers of students that take. So we're about 1,000 or more students are tested in each of those grades. So it's a lot of data behind each of these data points. This is the achievement percentile averages by each of those major student groups that we saw in some of our previous slides. So again, we'll see here we still have some work to do in terms of students who have traditionally underperformed, as you saw in our national data set. It's still one of those things we're continuing to work on, but this kind of shows what that looks like for each of the major student groups in our district. When we switch to growth, this is our growth data from last fall to this fall. So you'll see there's missing information for kindergartners for this year because they weren't taking an NWA assessment because they weren't in the district to take one. So that's why there's a blank there for their kindergarten group. But this represents the percent of the students who met the expected growth based on that national norm sample. So again, there's that orange line. So the expectation really is that about 50% of students will meet their growth expectations. So anytime you see information above that orange bar, that means you're beating the expectation. You're catching those kids up on average, and they're gaining more in relative to the rest of the students in the national norming sample. And so especially you can see here in math in grades 3 and 6 that they're well above what we might expect based on norming data for the last several years in the national data set. So there's some really positive things happening in many of these grade levels as they're above that percent expected to meet expectations in several grade levels and in many content areas here. And here are the same growth expectations, but for each of those student groups again. So again, you can see here that many of our student groups, while maybe they're not as high achieving as other student groups, we're seeing that many of them are still making expected growth or near expected growth going from our fall to fall tests over the last year. And as Beth mentioned, this is our Save the Date card for our Panorama student and family survey data, where we'll talk about changes in what we saw from last year to this year, some enhancements in our reporting we have, as well as some comparisons, and then how we connect what we are finding from our survey data to our current and future work and activities.
And with that, I'll pop back on and talk about some of our current and future activities. So some of the key activities that we're doing to continuously support this work, including as we look at those students who are historically underperforming, how we kind of maximize and double down on their growth, because we need to see greater than average expected growth for them. So as we look at our programming, one of the things we implemented last year, so last year was the first full year of implementation and data, was the Teacher on Special Assignment program at elementary, middle, and high school. Elementary and middle school, our teachers push into classrooms to provide additional individual and small group support. Middle and high school, they meet with students outside of the regular class time to layer on some additional supports. At high school level, it's really about personalized and individualized support plans for students on caseloads. And as you see on the right column, those are the data sets that we'll use to measure the success. So in the spring, we'll come back around, and actually mid-year we'll come back around because of budget season and talk about the implementation and the effectiveness of many of these programs. Instructional coaching is about providing support for Tier 1 instruction and building capacity in classrooms. So instructional coaches support side by side with teachers. You heard us talk about that last year pretty extensively at SPA and also at the Board of Education meeting. And again, it's about growing capacity of our teachers in all classrooms. Specialized student services, elementary special ed teacher consultants, and again, it's providing coaching, building skill sets, and extra support for our teachers who work with our students with individualized education programs, our special ed students. Elementary student success specialists, you heard one of them here tonight. We hired a new one tonight, but it's really about supporting those behavioral and academic and social emotional supports to help students stay in school, building those foundational skills as well. Middle school deans of student support were implemented 2 years ago and really focus on behavior and reducing behaviors so that we keep students in classrooms. High school student success teacher is new this year, as is the high school student success room. You'll hear more about this as we talk. But we've implemented a room at the high school where we're looking at additional supports for students who tend to have ongoing behavior challenges so that we can keep them in school rather than suspending outside of school wherever possible, and build those academic skill sets and those behavioral skill sets to stay in school. The huge one that we talked about a lot at the end of last year and implemented this fall is training on U-Fly. So digging in deeper in early elementary around explicit and systemic construction around phonics, phonemic awareness, structured literacy. When you hear about the science of reading, this is talking about the science of reading. Doubling down on those early grade levels and building those foundational skills that then we layer supports on as they move through as the students move through our system. And then last year, at the end of the year, or actually it might have been earlier this year, the board approved some curricular resources for our students with IEPs, specifically Encore and Pays Lab, to again support more phonics, vocabulary, comprehension skills for our students with IEPs to help close those demographic gaps. With that, we're going to open up for questions and feedback. I'm going to invite Jonathan back up here specifically for some data digs, and I'm going to come over here so that we both have a mic to be able to answer questions.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Ms. McCoy, do you have any questions?
I have a lot of questions, but I'll keep it brief. So this was a lot of information that I appreciated. I like when we see, so I guess, I don't know, maybe it's more of a comment. So on the slide that talked about our student demographics, and we see that it's gone down to 20% of economically disadvantaged. And it could be because people are not filling out those forms. Could we remind the community of what else is tied to those forms? Because with the breakfast and lunch in the state budget, people may not feel the need to fill out the forms.
Correct.
So those forms are critically important for us because they help provide a lot of resources beyond just your general funded resources. For example, Title I programming, 31 AA funding at the state level. Additionally, it also matters to families because those are things that help support pay to participate and allow students to get some extra supports for those students and families who have some economic additional economic needs. So there's a lot of different supports that are built in on that. Also, our allocations are tied to those numbers. And a good example of that is a couple of years ago, although during the pandemic when the census was done, many people did not fill out the census, and because of that we fell below 5% as a district in the community, although we know our community is higher than 5%, and we lost $500,000 worth of federal funding. We've worked really diligently as a teaching and learning team with the state and federal governments, and we've been able to now get those recertified, and we're able to recapture some of those funds. But it's really about just ensuring that you fill out the forms to help support the programming that we can offer.
In the assessment world, there's some additional benefits too, which the College Board gives a lot of cost savings to students for AP testing, PSAT testing, SAT testing, and then also score reporting.
Um, so, you talked, well, in one of the slides, it talked about the decrease in suspensions.
Mhm.
And do we know what is driving that decrease? Is it children are better behaved? Is it because they're being tracked appropriately?
I can't answer that one again. So that's one of those high levels data points, and I'm not that close to the information to know those things. So I don't know if Beth, if you could speak to some of those things that might be impacting.
There's been a number of different initiatives developed to do this, one of which is early intervention. So trying to identify students who tend to have more recidivism in disciplinary actions and building on those additional supports. So for example, the high school student success room, also the deans of student support and elementary student success specialists work early with students who seem to have additional behavioral challenges over time. So it's about digging in earlier and helping kind of build those skills to be able to engage together in a different way. Additionally, we are working with the Office of, or the Department of Student and Family, or Student Services, sorry, there's all of us now. And it's a revision of the handbook and digging into the language to ensure that our language is cleaner around what different suspensions mean, so that we can help better track data and also, layer on additional supports for the different disciplinary categories that we tend to see more often than others. So there are a number of different initiatives that kind of help support that.
Okay. I'll move on for right now.
Okay.
Member Picard?
Okay, do most elementary schools have student success specialists, or is there like different amounts?
Yep, 8 of them do, and it's based on data. The team worked last year, so there's different supports at different buildings based on the data and the needs of the building. So as we look at equitable practices, last year the elementary principal team worked diligently with, at that time, Director Maureen Malloy, our elementary director Maureen Malloy, and they looked across and had a lot of collaboration together about what is needed at each building for support. So 8 of the buildings have those. Other supports are available at other buildings. And we could provide some update in board notes about other positions that are available in all the different buildings for support.
And then a question, so are any of those positions like grant positions? Are they all supported by our general funding?
Yep.
Or?
Those
I
are
know
all,
there's-
yeah.
Oh, no,
I
go
didn't mean
ahead.
to cut you off. The elementary student success positions are general funded positions.
Okay.
So.
And is that the same as the TOSA ones? Are those,
The-
which ones are grant ones? I know
Yep, the
there's always
TOSAs,
support.
the teachers on special assignment at all 3 levels are 11T grant funded currently. And the teacher consultants, the elementary teacher consultants are ESSER 11T funded. And I can put a chart in board notes that show the other ones. We talked about them at SPA, and those are the 2 primary ones right now that are still 11T funded that we'll be bringing data around as well. So.
Okay, oh yeah, that'd be good. Thank you.
Secretary Sadoo?
Thank you. It was really good to see the improvements in attendance and behavior. So it looks like some of the investments that are being made in those areas are making a difference. And looking at some of the other things, just kind of getting an overall feel beyond the 2 that I just mentioned. Where do you think where we're at with the investments that are being made? And where do you see the most promising results with those investments as
So-
we look at closing the opportunity
Yep.
gaps?
Different results in different areas. So obviously when you're looking at behavior, looking at some of the ones we've discussed, the elementary student success specialist, the high school. The high school room is new, so we'll get data on that this year, and the high school student, or student success teacher. So we have a lot of names now. When we look at academics, last year was the first year of the TOSA position at the elementary, which is a push-in position to help support small group instruction, especially at upper grade levels, because at the lower grade levels, we also have the kindergarten instructional paras, and then our instructional coaches that are diving in a little bit more deeply. So we have about a year's worth of data on that. We talked about it at the end of the spring last year, and we are seeing positive progress from those positions. So being able to rank them is really hard, because what we have to look at is what's the purpose and what's the impact of that. So all of them are showing positive progress, in different ways because they're developed to target different aspects. The implementation is going very well so far with UFly. It's very early with that, but we're hearing very positive things from our teachers in our classrooms and our buildings about implementation of UFly. So we'll get some more longitudinal data on that as we move forward. But you know, every position has had positive impact so far in different ways.
So where do you see those positive impacts with regard to the NWEA, the PSAT, SAT, the data that we're looking at? Where are you able to identify that?
So it's harder to see it in a large grain size. When we look at it, we're really, on some of the, for example, the TOSAs, they're working with a caseload of students. So you're talking about 20, 30 students, and you're seeing positive impact with those students. As you look at big grain sizes, you're not going to see huge swings left and right, and Jonathan can kind of speak to that better in data terminology, but we're looking at 1,000 students versus the 20 or 30 students that are specifically worked on the caseload of a TOSA. For those 20 or 30 students, there's huge progress being made. We've seen at the high school level, for example, a decrease in the number of credits, you know, that the number of classes that students failed, a huge increase in their attendance. So a lot of work around sense of belonging and feeling welcomed and as though they have their champion in the building. Those things are significant for each student. So, you know, it's the impact and the size of the impact based on as we look at this, we're looking at satellite data, as Jonathan kind of talked about. There's also satellite data, there's map data, which means kind of more at the school level, and then there is what we call street data, which is boots on the ground right next to a young person. So that street data is where we're seeing the greatest impact right now, which then over time comes up into the satellite data.
So I'm looking at some of the data with regard to grades 3, 4, and 5. Pretty much across the board, and just wondering why many of those areas you are seeing a decline.
In terms of the state assessment data?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there are some slight declines there, and again, you know, with the metric of a percent proficient, there are noted issues with that metric just as a thing. Unfortunately, that's a thing we can't uncouple because that's kind of where the entire federal and state system has gone to this percent proficient. That's what they build their accountability systems on. That's what the federal government looks at states when they put these systems in. So unfortunately, we're stuck with that metric because that's kind of how we talk about it. So there are some issues with it. But also remember, these students were right there in the middle of the pandemic at the earliest grade levels, the most developmental levels. So some of those things that we talked about in the national data set, kind of that rebound of students coming back has kind of stalled. And so those are things we're continuing to work on, and hopefully that the growth data we're seeing, like that one group, when we look at NWA growth for that third grade group, those are some positive trends we're hoping to see then reflected in the state data now that we see that. Where's the growth data here? Right there. So those third graders there, especially in math, that's really their second grade year we're talking about. That's like their fall in second grade to their fall in third grade. So some great things happened there. So those are some positive things we can see, like, okay, we're getting to those kids, they're growing more than we expect. So hopefully we'll see that then reflected in some of the larger grain size data, like the state assessment data. Again, that's not the only data point, but here's kind of some evidence that good things are happening. It just might not be reflected in some of these large assessments that are kind of, you know, huge ships that are hard to steer sometimes because they're so big and they measure kind of a really large grain size level of data.
And you're also seeing, you know, math below the average there,
Yep.
which is
Yep. And so those things were like that, and that's that thing where those are patterns we need to dig into. And so we'll use some of that additional data we have access to, even more data now, and use those systems we have to then investigate, is this a real thing happening? Is this really happening? And then hopefully we'll see that some of those students that might fall into that lower growth category, especially in that grade level, those are probably students that might be working with a TOSA. So hopefully we'll identify some of those students are getting those additional services, and we'll see, at least for that individual group, those kids moving, and hopefully then see it moving as an entire grade level as well.
And one thing to lift too, and I know that Jonathan didn't mention it this time, I think because we've mentioned it every time previously, which is our students in second grade take the MAP 2.5 versus the K2 MAP. The K2 MAP has some additional supports built in. It reads the test, there's additional things. But as you look at the national normed, most districts across the nation take the K2. And when they do the national norming at NWEA, they don't separate them out. So every second grader in the nation is measured against every, the norm is every second grader in the nation, regardless if they're taking the K2 map or the 2.5 map. So we almost always, we have historically, since I've been here, I know for the history pre-me as well, is that we've always seen that dip in second grade because we do the more rigorous assessment for our second graders.
I have more, but I'll come back.
Okay, sounds good. Treasurer Kehoe?
So, and I apologize for if it's not, I thing I'm struggling with is that we have this multi-year trend data on the state assessments for the MSTEP and the PSAT. But the NWA data we only have this year. And I know that some of that we see that as students move through that process, but it's still, one of the things I'm looking for is are we trending better? Are we doing better for a given grade year or anything like that? Is there a way to get the comparison data year over year for the NWEA instead of just for the state assessments?
Absolutely, and we do look at that, internally. And so what we struggled with was this is kind of how we presented it last year. So we wanted to keep that format so we could have but absolutely, and those are things we can also make available in some of those notes that have kind of that the average percentile over time to see are things moving, and we see some positive trends. We see some things, especially because of the pandemic, that they aren't so positive, but absolutely we can make that available in terms of both achievement and growth, kind of a trend level comparison base.
I think that would be helpful because in particular, the state assessments, we don't have that broken down by group.
Right.
We have it broken down by some super big grade categories, but the NWA data, we're breaking it down by groups so we can start to see the impact to our subgroups in this process.
Right.
And obviously we have some subgroups that are doing really well and some subgroups that continue to not do well in the process, even compared to the national norm. And that's very troubling for us in this process.
Right.
So if we look at this slide here, for example, for the growth, when we're looking at the national norm, is that across all groups or is that for people, I'm sorry, can you go to this
like this one here with the different
yeah, like
groups?
this one. Is that yellow line normed for those subgroups? Okay, so that's across all groups then.
That's
okay.
the national average for all students, regardless of, their needs.
Is there subgroup data available from NWEA?
I don't believe they make subgroup norming information available for their assessments.
Okay, because that would help us to understand whether we're.
They don't even collect that from district. I think the only thing they collect might be some race and gender if districts decide to upload that into their system. So they would have to do some additional data studies to look at that, and they have not shared that or made that public if they have done those subgroup level norms.
So ultimately that's my concern is, are we making progress?
Mm-hmm.
I know that we've made a lot of changes over the last couple of years, specifically because we were not making progress before, and being able to see whether we're making progress is really the key in these discussions. So if we can go back to the state assessments for just a second, in particular, I'm looking at fourth grade mathematics. The thing that's striking to me, and it's just a single data point, we're declining, and we're declining against a trend where both at the Wayne-Risa level and the statewide, they're going up. And that seems to be going in the wrong direction for me in that particular area. It's one thing if we're all kind of moving in the same direction, but in this particular one, we're seeing a decline across that. Have you guys done any deeper analysis in that?
Yeah, we've been working on digging into this with buildings specifically, so sitting side by side with building principals, looking into classrooms, where are we seeing the growth, where are we seeing the stagnation, where are we seeing decline. So we do that at the classroom level as well and have those conversations all the way down to the student level. Math was our hardest hit area in the pandemic, and we continue to really work on mathematics. Appreciate the board allowing us to uncouple our curriculum coordinators and help fund a math coordinator separate from VAPA, which was a huge piece, so that we could continue to really dive into this area. This has been our area of focus. I mean, all areas are our area of focus. This has been one that's been a particular area of focus for us as we saw this data start trending last year.
And just for some context, sometimes it's hard to make sense of is 58% good? And so that's the one thing that we don't have, like, what is a good enough proportion of our students. But what we do know is that the state recently set school level targets in their accountability system for ELA and math. And they're 32 state level targets for schools. In math is 44% proficient. That's their target and that's at like the 75th percentile of the state. So you can see that at 58%, that's well above most districts.
Which one are you saying is 58%?
58%, the fourth grade M-STEP math.
I'm sorry, I was looking at economic disadvantage. That's why I got confused for a second. Thank you.
Yeah. And so 44% is kind of like the benchmark that the states are holding buildings to when they look at accountability systems. So in some cases, so that kind of at least gives a context for like how high performing the district is. It's not discounting the fact that there's a slight decrease in trend and that it's not something we shouldn't look into, but it just kind of sets a little bit of a context to kind of set like, okay, what should we expect of a high performing district and where should that be? And in ELA, that percentage is 56%, that kind of state building target for accountability. And if you look at that same level, grade 4 M-STEP, we're at 62%, which is well above kind of that state target for a building.
Is the state assessment data available by group, like we've broken out the
Yeah, and that's in the packet, the additional...
The companion packet.
Linked
in the board.
Has every student group broken down in comparisons to both the county and the state with percent proficient for each of the student groups that we've mentioned.
Okay, great, thank you. And then when we look at the growth data, certainly on the growth data for NWEA, there was a highlight with in growth with grade 3, but the other, grade 3 and grade 6 are doing good, but the other grades are like very mixed in that process. So, can you give us some insight in terms of what's happening there for those numbers?
So if 50% of our students are meeting their typical growth expectations, that's like kind of the national norm, So every bit above that means that more of our students are catching up or they're exceeding expectations. And just because a student doesn't meet their growth expectation doesn't mean they're not growing at all.
Right.
It just might mean that they're maybe not as growing compared to other students who scored like them from before. So there might be still some growth and they're getting close, but maybe they didn't hit kind of that exact expectation that NWA sees in their data set.
Yeah, I just would look at first, second, fourth, and fifth. In mathematics, all of them are below the 50% line.
Yes, and you also look at that kind of grayish band in the back, and that's the 40th to the 60th percentile, and that's the kind of what NWA calls the target range. So when we look at that, we're not at the 50th percentile or above yet. The target ranges, are they touching at least that 40th percentile? And again, second grade, remember, the second grade assessment always looks a little bit wonky because we do the 2-5.
And we've talked about second grade many, many times. So I get second, that just first and fourth.
Correct. There's room for improvement, and we're continuing to dig in.
But those are the similar things where when we see something like that, like, okay, let's keep an eye on that first grade cohort, and when we have those students test in the winter and the spring, we'll make sure that we'll track, okay, are we now catching those students up? Because maybe they didn't make enough growth over that last from fall to fall from their kindergarten year to their first grade year. But so we're hoping now through their first grade year, we're going to see some trends upward. So those are some of those things we use to identify and then track some of those things.
So if I would understand this correctly, is this if we look at the all students for the state assessment,
Mhm.
and that was an assessment that was done last spring, if I
Correct.
remember correctly.
Yep. Mhm.
And so the third grade students there
Mhm.
are actually relatively good, but yet when we look at the fourth grade students in the NWEA, which would be the fall assessment for those ones,
Mhm.
it's our growth by grade is not great.
We're crossing metrics and different assessments. So it's kind of apples and oranges in terms of like, because we're looking at achievement on a state assessment that's more geared toward grade level content, and then the NWA's growth is looking at normative change over time compared to a national set. So there's a little bit of apples and oranges comparison there. But yeah, we definitely look at those things. So like from an individual student perspective, those things definitely play when we have like their M-STEP information, their local assessment data, like some of the things we're collecting out of the U-Fly system, some are local grades, and then also NWA and other information they're all taken into consideration when we're supporting students or looking at a classroom level. But it's hard to go from that fourth grade M-STEP to then
It's actually third
the
grade.
fifth grade, or yeah, the fourth to the fifth, or the third to the fourth.
That's the thing that's striking to me. This is third grade M-STEP
Right.
to fourth grade NWA growth. You know, they're relatively highly proficient at the third grade M-STEP level, but when you test them at the fourth grade level for their achievement and growth against their expected growth targets, you know, we're just not seeing that. So I'm having a hard time understanding. You know, I recognize that they're very different tests and that they're measuring different things, but you would expect to see a correlation between the achievement or not.
Yeah, and I think we're high performing on the state assessments. We're high performing on NWA. So if we look at those fourth graders here in this one in the achievement, because for M-STEP that's achievement data. It's not growth data. That's achievement. So that's achievement on our state assessment, and then this is achievement on the NWA assessment. And if you really look at like those percentile ranks there, those average percentile ranks are extremely high. So if we were to look at say a district or a building with an average percentile rank that high, that will probably be in like the 80th or 90th percentile in the nation. So we're very high performing, and so so in terms of that, I don't see a huge drop when we look at achievement in M-STEP and then achievements in NWA in that perspective. Growth, definitely, yes. We want to see growth over time. We want to see students making a year's worth or more, hopefully, of growth over time. And so those are things we're definitely tracking, and that's what the growth data kind of gets a little bit of a different perspective on student performance, where it looks at, did they change more than the average student over time?
Yeah, that's when we're catching up.
Yeah, and that's when we're catching up, and so that's when we want to see, especially those students who don't represent some of those high achievement levels. We're hoping definitely to see those kids then make more growth than expected, so we can catch them up and close those gaps, especially with the impact of the pandemic over time.
Okay. Thank you.
Trustee Westphal.
I think we had a lot of these questions in discussion last night, and I really appreciate the additions that you made to the packet, because it made it easier for lay people like me to understand what story you're trying to tell here and what are the key factors that you're trying to tell. I don't know that I have any more questions or comments than have already been asked. Well, actually, I do have one comment. You mentioned last night the idea of having kind of a more in-depth workshop around that, and I really think that would be helpful, because certainly for the non-educators at this table and in our community, this is incredibly difficult to understand, and it's easy to draw erroneous conclusions from the data. So I really like that idea, and I hope that we'll see a workshop, you know, maybe not just for us, but for the whole community.
And now there's an additional metric to your question, Mr. Kehoe, about looking at, you know, going from NWA to M-STEP. So there's an additional metric that we haven't traditionally looked at, but is available, which is a projected
MSTEP proficiency score based on NWA data. So the NWA company does create a projected score based on a student's NWA score. So those are things that we can investigate further to say, okay, let's have our fourth graders take the NWA in the fall. What is their projected score based on all available data that NWA has to say, what is the likelihood they're going to pass the MSTEP assessment when they take it in the spring? And so what we can do is see if, does that hold?
We see the
And
correlation.
so those are some of the things that we can look at. That only starts at the end of second grade, so we can't show it for all grade levels. So it's something we can investigate and further either in reports or in some of these presentations we talk about kind of that one-to-one. Are we seeing things in NWA then track to our MSTEP assessments?
Right. I mean, ultimately, from my perspective, the work that we're trying to do is to say, are we trending in the right direction? Are we taking the right mitigation and change steps? And seeing the right results. I mean, doing the same thing and expecting different results is the definition of insanity. So we have to look and say, and I think there has been some really great innovation that's been going on over the last couple of years to try to address some of these issues that we've been seeing in the process. And I just think I'm having a hard time digesting those things to see, are they actually making a meaningful difference? And some of the numbers that we're seeing are not trending in the right direction. Some of that may be when you change a process, you sometimes see a dip in what happens as you change that process until it becomes ingrained in the culture and everybody understands it. It's the normal thing that happens when you do a process improvement. So I don't know whether we're seeing that or we're seeing something else, and I'm not close enough to the data here to be able to really be able to make those draw those conclusions or assessments. And I guess we're looking for you guys to give us some guidance. Is we're happy with what's happening. Here's the areas that we're unhappy with, and here's what we're doing to change that.
Okay, Josh, do you have any questions?
Yeah, sorry. I would just like to echo Member Westra's comments. I got the privilege to see it last night, and then the new presentation that has made it 100% clear, even without the animation. So, thank you.
Yes. Thanks for your input.
Yep, I'm going to go back around. I don't have any questions. Thank you for all of this information. Thank you to my fellow board members for the thoughtful questioning. I'll go one more time around. Trustee McCoy, do you have any questions?
I do. I will send them in.
Okay.
I'm having a hard time formulating exactly what it is that I want. I don't want to just spend 5 minutes rambling.
Sure.
All right, I just had a question. Has the math curriculum changed? That could have affected the math situation with the data, the decrease. Has there been a change in curriculum or process?
No, I don't know.
We implemented the Envision Mass curriculum in the elementary during the 2019-2020 school year.
Okay, so and that's just a different. I'm not familiar with that, so I don't know what that would. Is it called Envision?
Yes.
Okay.
So if we're doing then a comparison against 18-19, that would be a change in that process.
Throw a little pandemic in there too, and make it real messy.
It's a big change. Any other questions?
No, I'll send them to you. I've got
Okay,
kind
sounds
of a
good.
mess here.
Secretary
Yeah, just a
Sadoo?
couple more. So, we look at the slide and we talk about, like, as a district, we look great. And then I go to the next slide.
Yeah.
And those gaps continue to persist.
That's my question. Are we closing those gaps?
Right, right.
How,
And so,
how does this look across the last 5 years?
exactly. And so what I would like to get is data for slides 23, 24, 25, 26. Those 4 slides, trends for all of those bar graphs. Whether you can go back 3 or 5 years. That's it.
We have those.
Thank you.
You and I are aligned.
All right.
Trustee, Treasurer Kehoe?
That was my question as
Okay.
well. So I mean, we beat it to death.
Yeah.
Trustee
And
Westra?
that was gonna be the one thing that I asked for, that we asked for last night, but I don't think it made it into the final
Sure.
presentation.
Actually, I do have one more. I wrote it down in my chicken scratch somewhere, but let me see. I think it was slide. When I look at slides 29 and beyond, I look at what data will be used to measure success, and I see NWEA in quite a few of them. And then we go to middle school and high school, dean of students and student success teacher. I want to say that's slide 32. I wonder, why wouldn't you want to look at PSAT scores here or other academic?
These are focused more explicitly on behavior. So when we look at these positions, they're more about helping look at attendance and behavior than they are necessarily focused as deeply on academic achievement. So it would be something that we would look at as well, but primarily with the deans of student success or deans of student support and the high school student success teacher, these positions are designed to help keep kids in school around behavior. So.
Okay, Josh, do you have any more questions?
Just one. So could you go to the MSTEP data for the economically disadvantaged?
Mm-hmm.
I might have missed something.
This?
So does that say 10% or 0% when it dips down to the?
Which?
Oh, it says 10. Okay. For a second I thought it
Oh, I
said
see it.
0, but it says 10. So thank you. Because I was just curious on how it could be a 0%, but it is 10. So thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're on to citizens' comments. Just want to remind everyone that you get 3 minutes and it's your time to address the board. First up is Andy Patterson.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Andy Patterson, and I'm a former graduate of the Canton High School, class of 03. And I'm here to speak on the fact that you guys are considering changing the mascot name from the Chiefs head to the Cobras. And I don't think you fully understand what you're doing in that decision. And speaking as someone that's 100% North American Indian, who attended your school, who had older siblings that attended your school from 86 up to 03, up to when I graduated, the disrespect that I see for you not understanding what it means to have that name as your mascot. To me, you are erasing our culture because you think it's better because it offends everybody else. I understand we're in a PC world, I get that. But being 100% Native American, and I see this every day through and throughout, on the news outlets all over the place, everybody's changing their mascots because they don't want to offend somebody. How about honor it? Care about it. You had a student that was white that found this offensive and put a whole presentation together back in 21 because she found it offensive, because she wanted to change it. She only talked to one Native American tribe, and they don't even attend the school district. They don't go here. So when you sit there and you just go ahead and vote and push something through like you did back in July, why did you put that survey out then, that poll out, and ask those questions to the community and have them vote on it and say they wanted 80% of them wanted to keep the name? Then I just read and found out that kids had put that name back down in the nomination, 55 or 60 votes or whatever, and you continue to ignore it. The Chicago Blackhawks just put out a statement that they're going to keep their name because they're honoring our heritage. They're respecting it. And as somebody that attended the school, I was very proud to attend that school. Got some other questions about the other things too later, but that'll be in another meeting. But you are not looking at the true nature of that situation. You're just trying to get a name in and have something, and then you're picking the Cobras. To me, that's the definition of a snake is somebody that plays both sides. and you're gonna pick the Cobras as our mascot, that is terrible, in my opinion. I just don't understand it. The name's been around for 50 years, and because people are trying to find it offensive or somehow dishonorable to have that name, to be named chief of your tribe means you're gonna take the best interest of the tribe and put them in the best direction possible. But you guys are just pushing it right through, and you don't care about the listening what I have to say or anybody else has to say that's Native American. Thank you.
Okay, next up is Phil Venable.
Close enough. It's Venables, but that's okay.
Okay, Venables. Thank you for correcting me.
All right, after many months coming to these school board meetings, I've learned a lot. Mostly, I've learned that the bulk of the time is spent back padding. And lots of job hires and positions of kind of questionable value. I've learned that this board is comprised of one rational thinker, 6 hypocrites, and 1 superintendent who ignores the community while selectively using school policy as a shield for her actions. The superintendent has shown clearly in the way the student walkout was handled that the board policies are arbitrary at best. I learned that this board, which claims to only act in the best interest of the kids, chose to make a mountain out of a molehill by ignoring the wishes of the majority of the community and the students by eliminating the chief's name and nomenclature, regardless of the fact that the majority of the students didn't want to change. Was this change the result of area Native Americans who were offended by the name chiefs? No. In fact, the overwhelming majority were in favor of keeping the name chiefs. Why? Because they viewed chiefs as leaders. And the name showed great respect. But this board didn't care because their minds were made up. Was cultural appropriation the main argument for the name change? If so, that's beyond absurd. There's absolutely nothing wrong with cultural appropriation because Americans do it every day. You pick your menu, you go to have spaghetti or chop suey or tacos or hamburgers or sushi. That's cultural appropriation. Some women choose to disguise their hair using different wigs of one culture or another. So what? Apparently, in this board's mind, chiefs was an offensive term. The irony, which apparently went unnoticed by this board, is that this very school system has 3 key players in the organizational chart whose titles are chiefs. Chief Academic and Innovation Officer, Chief Human Resources Officer, Chief Finance and Operations Officer. Using the twisted logic of this board, should we now demand that these policy offensive titles be changed? Why is the name change a big deal? Because it was unnecessary. It was a colossal waste of time. There are many more pressing issues that this board should be focused on, like reading and math scores, for example, declining enrollment, and graduating kids who actually learn something and aren't being pushed through just to pad the rankings. From a cost point of view, the change was decided upon despite the fact that there were no funds set aside for such a change. And then there's nothing more absurd than hearing the superintendent saying that the school will apply for a grant to help with the enormous cost. What's completely ignored is that grants aren't made up of fairy dust. They're funded by tax dollars, and taxpayers will ultimately pay the bill. Talking with hundreds of residents, many of whom have pulled their children out of the system because of the direction the schools has been heading, has been enlightening. The foolishness surrounding the name change has awakened the community, and they are watching.
Next up, we have Steve Robb.
I'm part of what we call the recall leadership team. Our recall effort has gone far beyond the chief's issue. I have attended board meetings and have been reading our Facebook recall page for 5 months. We have over 1,800 members on our page, and they post their concerns. We have recently FOIA'd documents concerning the Palestine walkout and the student mascot voting. The district emails show us that this administration was not telling the truth about these events. Looking back, were they telling us the truth about the whole Chiefs name change effort? Was that really student initiated and student led, or was it initiated and facilitated by the administration? The 1,800 have a long list of concerns, led by failure to put children first, failure to represent the community you were elected to serve, failure to prioritize student experience, student enrichment, and student success, focusing on your personal agendas, financial mismanagement and poor decisions, nepotism and cronyism, administrator excess, and more. Read our page. I will list them all next time with details. At one of the first meetings I came to, we were told that the drop in district enrollment was due to a glitch in the birth rate. It was hard not to laugh. Have you seen the amount of new construction in Canton and the fact that they have increased their population by 20,000 people in 10 years? Every private school and charter school within 30 minutes of here is full of Plymouth Canton residents, with many more on their waiting lists. Glitch in the birth rate? I don't think so. A report last week says that we have lost 1,180 students in the past 4 years, and we were told at a meeting that it is now $9,600 per pupil spending. That's well over $11 million going somewhere else. Losing students is a prime example that you are failing the students and parents of this community. The school district is failing. You are the leaders. You are leading the failure with your personal agendas and your apathy towards us, the students, the community in general. This is the 1800 speaking, but there are more. Some of you smirk at our comments and concerns every meeting. You ignore us. You don't tell us the truth. You don't care about us. You roll your eyes and swivel in your chairs. We see you walk out of here smirking. Well, tonight we're going to smirk back. As a matter of fact, a lot of us are smirking back. At this point, we have more than 10,500 signatures on recall petitions. 10,500 that say you are failing our children, plus the 1,800 on our recall page that posted their many concerns. That is a lot of people who want some of you gone, the voices of the community. In the coming days, we will continue to bring awareness of this administration's mismanagement and dysfunction to our community until these board seats are filled with members who prioritize our children, our students, our parents, our teachers, and our taxpayers. We are not going away.
Up next, we have Lisa Capatina.
Good evening. My name is Lisa Capatina and I live at 634 South Harvey in Plymouth. Full disclosure, I currently do not have children in the Plymouth Canton school system. I do however, have 4 grown children, 2 of whom who have recently purchased homes here in Plymouth and plan to raise their families here. As a result, amidst all the educational turmoil of the last couple years, I have been paying attention and I have been attending many school board meetings. Of particular note recently for me was the free breakfast and lunch for all students. And where I believe none of us want any child to go hungry, myself included, I was a bit confused when Representative Kolazar stated that the free program was not need-based, but available to anyone who wants it, even if it is used as a snack to take home and enjoy and/or discard. I then took the liberty to review some of the school menus to see what is being offered at taxpayer expense. I was confused and disappointed by some of what I found. We all know that if anything was learned from the pandemic crisis, we learned obesity and being overweight are huge factors in negatively impacting healthy outcomes. Our own CDC website states obesity increases the risk of severe illness from COVID-19. People who are overweight may also be at increased risk for hospitalization. Obesity is linked to impaired immune function. Also, it states that a healthy diet can prevent or support self-management of disease. The CDC states our schools are in a unique position to be a line of defense to promote healthy behaviors and nutrition. So when I saw some of our school lunch options include corn dogs, mac and Cheetos, tacos in a bag with Doritos, or for instance, Canton breakfast options include mini Cinnies, Goodyman pull-aparts, chocolate donut packs, powdered donut packs, and mini blueberry glazed donut holes, I was perplexed as to how those reflect healthy nutritional options. Based on their nutritional calculators, they clearly do not. I therefore respectfully challenge this board, if we truly care about health and well-being, instead of looking to mandatory masking or to close in-person classrooms as your first line of defense in the event of the next community illness threat, be proactive. Review all the menu choices being offered to your students. Teach them to choose healthy and why it is important. Lead them by your example on how to stay healthy, by the choices you offer them, especially in a free meal program. Thank you for your consideration.
Okay, up next we have Steve Gentilia.
Good evening. A few things I wanted to touch on tonight, after listening to the meeting tonight became a concern. Band uniforms. I just can't get over the fact that we want to spend $188,000 for something that's going to service 158 kids, when we could spend that same amount of money on athletics that serves many more kids. Many more kids. It's astounding. We just built them building them a $3 million band room. $188,000 can be used in many other ways for the athletics program in this district. Many more. It's just the continual ignorance of ignoring the athletics is terrible. One other thing. Last meeting, I felt it was astounding, I was appalled at Board Member Wilson's behavior towards Board Member Picard. And you all should have been too. Not a single one of you stood up for her when she was being attacked, being bullied by that man, by the president of this board, being told she's not prepared. I'm sorry, but she is prepared. She was prepared and asked questions that needed to be asked. And those things are getting done. And this is his third of the last 5 meetings that have been missed. I get it. He's on work-related business. But I don't think he's suitable to lead this board. And I would almost demand, and I wish the rest of you would also, a public apology to Ms. Picard from him at the next meeting. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes our citizens' comments. We are now on to item F, action items and discussion. Okay. So we have action item number 24-12-36, consider approval of a resolution to adopt a new mascot for Canton High School, final reading. Can I please have a motion?
Madam Vice President, I move that we consider approval of a resolution to adopt a new mascot for Canton High School. Final reading, action item 24-12-36.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so this was moved by Treasurer Kehoe and seconded by Trustee McCoyne. I do want to open it up for one round of comment or discussion if we feel so inclined to, but I do want to provide a little bit of background. We did discuss this. We had a first reading at our last meeting. Mr. Hurd and Principal Reed Norwal shared a presentation around the work that has been done to bring this resolution to the board. There was a follow-up question regarding some student participation within the mascot committee, which we all learned was open to any student who wanted to join and participate, and all that voice their opinion to do so were able to. Another follow-up was requested around the rubric that was used in the decision-making process in this recommendation. Now, Principal Reed Norwal was able to verbalize that to us during that meeting, but we also received that rubric within board notes. So at this point, I'll open up to any other questions or comments prior to our vote. So starting with Trustee McCoyne, if you have anything you want to say.
I don't, thank you.
I just want to say that as a board, we should really consider our community. I mean, we did do a survey. They voted to keep it I mean, we're happy when they vote for money or bonds and things like that, but I just think that when we look at our dynamic plan, I don't think that we're, for marketing purposes and that, I mean, we're not, we kind of tend to choose exactly what we want, where it's kind of a conformity kind of thing, not really looking into the community and the differences and the diversity that we might have in our community. And I think even, as I read before, the tribe that, from Washington, D.C., that said, it even said in their statement, which I read before, that they acknowledge that tribes, schools, and sport teams can work together in ways that are respectful of tribal culture and respects the right of each tribe and tribal community to decide for itself how to best protect and celebrate its heritage and make their own decisions regarding their relationships with school and university sports teams. And we had plenty of Native Americans that came in our district to speak. We had a whole, I don't know where I put it, but pages of them that responded in the survey, and it didn't appear to be offensive to them. And so I just kind of think that we should respect those people. And Kansas City Chiefs, they had a boy stand up and had a headdress on, and he's Native American, his family's Native American, and they were fine with the name. They weren't, nobody was fighting that name, so they won the Super Bowl. So they had a lot of visibility. So I just want to say this because I disagree. I've had kids in the district, all different nationalities on the teams, nothing was said. And I think there's an inconsistency also in the district, just from what I've seen from being here on what's okay and what's not okay. And it wasn't very clear. It's kind of like whatever you can think, and it just wasn't clear. I think it's very inconsistent. So that's all.
Secretary Sidhu?
I have no additional questions from the last meeting, but I do want to reiterate, I want to thank the students that were involved with the process from beginning to end.
I echo those thanks, and as a former Canton graduate, as well as a parent of Canton students, I'm in support of the change.
I have no further questions. I'd just like to thank everybody that has been involved in this process and all of the opinions and comments that have been offered.
Okay. Josh, do you have anything?
So I'm not a Canton High School student, so from my perspective, I don't really have an opinion, but instead I'd like to just remind you to keep the children's voices in your head, whatever side that is.
All right. Thank you all for your comments. At this point, I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor, please say yes.
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 Those opposed, say no.
No.
Motion passes 5-1. We are on to consider approval of policy number 5310, health services. This is a first reading. Let's open this up to discussion now. I know this was at request of Member Picard. So
Yeah.
do you want to share your first commentary
Sure.
on that?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I'm just concerned, we were talking about physical exams, and down here it describes what an invasive physical exam was. And it's not clear at any time, I don't remember the district ever having a physical exam that I was ever notified by. And I think that the way it's put here is that they would be, there's nothing that says why there would be one or what it would be for. And we do have athletic physical examinations listed separate, so I can understand if somebody came in, they were gonna do physical exams, usually you have to take that note home and you come back with it. But it appears as if, okay, we're gonna tell the parents at the beginning of the year or about the approximate dates or when there's a specific date during the school year that a non-emergency invasive physical exam or screening is scheduled or expected to be scheduled. So time goes by, you've been notified, are you re-notified? There's nothing that says clear that parents will be notified the day of or what the purpose of, or I just don't understand why they would have parents go at the beginning of the school year to have their physicals, to enter school, they update those physicals. I didn't understand the responsibility of the school to do that and what the purposes would be, and it's not clear on this form. And then that was one of my concerns. And then my other concern was, mental health is also a health service, and it seems like that gets lost in the shuffle, and I think that, that parents need to be informed. I know SEL, sometimes from just reading from the state program under Castle and that, there's, different techniques that are offered, like, or that can be used in class, whether they are or not, I do not know. But mindfulness, some of these procedures, and some people would have a problem with that. I think there needs to be parent consent for that kind of thing, that you're providing some kind of, I don't know what you'd call it, procedure, or, I don't know what you'd call it, that students are doing a process to calm themselves or whatever. And I think sometimes that goes against some of the people's philosophy of life, and that they would prefer the children not be doing that. So I think there needs to be some specifics on when we're doing social emotional learning, which I don't find that to be something I personally would have opted out of that for my kids. But I think that there should be some parent notification or separate for mental health. But I don't understand this invasive physical exam, what the purpose of that would be at a school. Just like, oh, we're going to just have one in the middle of the year. That seems kind of unclear. It's not. I don't mind the change that we were asking for, the guardians, but I don't understand the whole. The whole policy doesn't seem clear. And as a parent, I would look at that and go, oh, they're going to have, when is it? Making sure you saw that. If you were a parent and didn't see it, and parents don't see everything that comes through. So
I wanna make sure that we're understanding the question you're asking. So this is around physical health services, this policy. And
well, it just says health services. So yeah, so maybe add physical health. I mean, health, mental health falls under health. So, but it's not clear.
And then your question is whether or not this policy covers parental consent at the beginning of the year and at the time of testing, correct?
Right, and just what would be the purpose of a invasive physical exam? I mean, there's usually parents take kids to the doctors for that. So, I mean, when you look at what it says, describes it as it, that would be concerning to me. If I missed something and my kid came home and said, "Oh, I had a shot today," or somebody looked at my privates, I would be very concerned.
I don't believe that's happening.
No, I didn't say it's happening. I said if I missed a notification, I'd be concerned.
I will say, in general, when you look at the very first line, any examination would be in accordance or compliance with the law. So in general, we don't have school-based health clinics where we're doing exams. Like back, if you think about like when this policy was initially adopted back in 1993, we had vision screenings, dental screenings, things along those lines as a community-based. You still keep policies in place if there are opportunities that we could have a site come on for vision screening or to help in terms of those resources. But again, any of those examinations, if that is something that we would do, your policy is saying at least annually, you would say when this is coming, but according to law, you'd always have to have that parental consent or notification if there's something that came up. So that's that key that you want to pay attention to, is that we're always going to, any doctor is not going to lose their license because they're operating outside of the realm of the law. And so that's where, I think the piece about the mental health that we were addressing, this is not included here. We don't have a separate mental health policy, but for mental health, we do show up within our threat assessment policy. For example, if there is a mental health evaluation that is conducted by our school employees, we are required for parental consent. And so you'll see that, I think I shared that with you in terms of that notification. Again, the key is in compliance with the law. So for mental health, that would be written notification or approval from parents. And also if there is a conversation to be had with an external doctor or healthcare provider, that also has to be a written consent from a parent. And so there's not things that we would operate without a parent being aware, not just annually, but at any time a student would be subjected to any type of examination. And again, these are not things traditionally that we see because we're not a community-based, we don't have a community-based health, but when you look at policies that would cover that in the event that there's something, say even an emergency type of situation where you see when I send you notifications that EMS has come and or say parent notification, you see those things that take place if they have to have a consent to assess a student in an emergency situation, that meaning EMS, but then they have to transport and they're working with parents for that notification. So again, just focusing on never operating outside of the law in terms of that consent and parental notification.
Okay. Oh, go ahead. Does anyone else have any question or comment?
I just want to comment. I had some concerns with some of the words in this as well, and we raised them in committee and had a really healthy debate about the terminology, and where Dr. Merritt explained exactly what was explained here, that eased me knowing that nothing would happen to a child without that parent consent or the notification, so the parent is the ultimate decision maker. And then I asked, why do we even have this? And the response was that we always want to have a policy in place just in case something was needed for whatever situation, if a parent does consent. We don't want to have a situation and say we don't have a policy to support this. And so legal even guided us in saying it's safe to have this policy as a just in case. But as Dr. Merritt reiterated, it's always with the parent consent if anything were to go forward. So that sort of eased me, and I, backed off. And Trustee McCoy, if you could add anything more in this debate that we had.
So we did discuss it, and we had our legal counsel at the meeting, and Ms. Langford had reached out to Neola, and they had suggested that we not remove things from their policy in case at some time in the future we became like a community-based health services. And I'd also like to remind people that when Neola was in, they did tell us that all of the policies are vetted through their legal before they are sent to us, and they are warranted. And if we make any substantive changes to their policies, we could be voiding a warranty to them, and that would open up our district to legal liability. So they suggested we just leave it alone.
On that front, was the removal of the scoliosis test, was that on their recommendation?
Yes.
Okay.
So help me understand, this policy has been in existence since 1993. Is the direction, is the reason that this policy is coming before the board to approve the policy in total, or are we really just approving these few changes?
So if you'll remember, our policy goal was to review all policies in the policy book, and we started with the 5,000s because those relate to students. And so this just had, some of them have minor word changes, like for instance taking out the scoliosis. Some have need much more changes, but we've just really made it a point to start reviewing our policies because they haven't been reviewed.
Okay. So I see here that it's recommended but not required. If it does not pass the final reading, then is it removed in its entirety, or are just
We've removed the entire policy. So some of the policies are required by state law. Like we have to have them. And you will see specific wording within the policy that relates to the state law. And so even though it's verbiage we might not have used, it comes from the laws. And so some of them, so when they say recommended, it's Neola recommends that we have these in our book. But to be a legally compliant district, we could not have it, but then if we have an issue in the future where we wanted to perhaps have a health clinic, as some districts are moving towards, we would not have a policy.
I would offer a friendly amendment that this particular, as you're bringing it forward, that's based on suggested but not required. So the policy itself would exist. These changes wouldn't go forward. Now, you as a board could then go back and say, do we want to remove the policy, which would be another
Okay,
action
so
item.
then the vote is to vote on the changes.
On the changes, not the
entire
policy itself. So
policy.
you're
Okay.
looking to revise, at this point, a policy based on recommendations that have come forward.
Right, okay. Thank you on that, for that clarification. Okay.
And it is, again, one of those things that, as things evolve, we don't always do these. We haven't done these in years, but I look at communicable diseases. So through COVID, we became actually a hub for families, so they can do drive-through testing here. And so your policy covered that. That's parents that worked. We did a third-party person, so parents actually worked with that, with their insurance. They had to have notification. But that's still, because it is your facility that allows that coverage in terms of any liability for the school
And
district.
this policy covered those
That is correct. So we didn't have to come and say, we need a new policy for this. Your policy existed, so we weren't expecting pandemic, and we were able to really be a source for our community, not just our students, but also families. But your policy did cover our students in that space.
Okay.
And we'll be reviewing all of the policies, and we'll be seeing these kinds of minor word changes that come through as part of that process. Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
We're buzzing right along.
Is there
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
We're buzzing right along with them.
Okay. Is there a policy, sorry, is there a policy on Neola that refers to mental health?
I did not see one, no.
Okay.
Any other questions? No? All right. Let's move on to follow-up board questions. Okay. Looks like you had a few. Yeah. Oh, here they are. Okay. Do you want to run through those, Dr.
Yep,
Merritt?
so we're looking at 31 AA grant funded. I think those are still outstanding. It's kind of a broader question in terms of any unmet needs or services that could be filled with additional funding. So I think as we saw the presentation, what is potentially $220 per student that would come from the grant funds. They did express that every district may not apply for those, so you would ask for more than you potentially would need. So, we definitely, as we see if it's accepted, are there things that we could fund in addition to those that would be at 220? And so I think that that's something that we can really discuss, but we'd keep that there in terms of unmet needs based on what is the availability or additional availability. And then I think over time, when you're looking for some data around the programs that are purchased with funds, so we need to keep that because we're bringing back some data to how those are used. And we'll have, as you heard earlier, some spring actual data on some of these specific items. The second piece, Member Wilson requested the update of the district, and I think we had the conversation here at the table. You heard Mr. Guessman today verbalize some of those totals. We talked about this at F&O, and we'll get that reduced to writing, where we looked at the last, really since the policy.
There'll be two parts of it. Since we started having the more robust data collection, that'll be included to talk about what information we've had and the different groups that have been part of that, as well as what the awards were done to those groups. But then they'll also include details about how they're soliciting and trying to include additional diverse suppliers to be part of our process. More bidders means better prices for the district.
So we would, that would remain, so still would be
It'll
forthcoming.
come forward at F&O, and then we'll bring it forward to the full board.
And then the final ask was related to the mascot selection, and so we did satisfy those through board notes. That was the rubric that was used, as well as the student participation rates from Liberty Middle School, and we just had anecdotal from Plymouth High School that provided what we had.
Great. Any new board follow-up questions from tonight?
Yes, the slides that I mentioned earlier, data for the last 3 or 5 years.
Sure. For the NWEA scores, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you have any others on that?
That's really, I mean, ultimately, it's looking at the trends and then telling us, are the areas that you're looking for improvements and the areas that you're happy with our progress. And for the areas that you're looking for improvements, what are the actions that are being taken in those areas?
Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, so at this point, we're on to H, adjournment to a special meeting where we're going to discuss the dynamic plan KPIs and dashboard with advanced learning partnerships. So this is still, we welcome all community members to join us for this public presentation. However, we're going to take a short recess at this time to allow anyone who wishes to leave to do so. Thank you.